What if I told you that during World War II an army didn't just wage war with guns and bombs, but turned human bodies into live laboratories? That in far-off Manchuria, under the cloak of research, a secret military unit dissected living men, women, even children, infected them with plague, cholera, anthrax, starved them, froze them, gassed them, simply to observe pain, disease progression, death. This was not science fiction, it was real. It happened under the banner of the Imperial Japanese Army's Unit 731. What you're about to hear is a brutal chronicle of cruelty, deceit, and forgotten victims. A chapter of medical horror that still demands to be remembered. Unit 731 was officially established in 1936 under the guise of the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Unit of the Japanese Kwantung Army, but in reality it was a covert biological and chemical weapons research facility. It was based in Pingfang, outside Harbin, in what was then Japanese-controlled Manchukuo. Commanded by physician officer Shiro Ishii, the unit was designed to develop bacteriological and chemical weapons for war, in clear violation of international norms. Over time it expanded into a sprawling complex of laboratories, operating rooms, barracks and crematoria, divided into multiple divisions dedicated to researching plague, anthrax, cholera, typhoid, and other pathogens, devising methods to deploy bioweapons, and testing lethal effects on living humans. What began as a secret war research project evolved into one of the most horrifying programs of human experimentation ever recorded. Prisoners, mostly Chinese civilians but also Russians, Koreans, prisoners of war, were seized, stripped of identity, dehumanized and referred to by staff as maruta or logs. These men, women, children, sometimes pregnant women, became test subjects. Inside the facility, doctors deliberately infected prisoners with deadly pathogens, plague, anthrax, cholera, typhoid. Some were then observed as the disease ravaged their bodies. Others were dissected alive after infection, without anesthesia, to study the internal effects. Organs were removed, limbs amputated, eyes examined, all under the guise of research. Many died from infection, starvation, dehydration, or direct medical mutilation. But the atrocities did not stop at diseases. Unit 731 tested the durability of the human body under extreme conditions. Some prisoners were subjected to hypothermia experiments, limbs frozen, then thawed. Some were placed in low-pressure chambers to simulate high-altitude or pressure conditions. Others were exposed to poison gases, incendiary weapons, or forced to endure dehydration and starvation. There were also tests on weapon effects, grenades, flamethrowers, shrapnel, on bound human targets to gauge lethality and wound patterns. In short, humans were treated as expendable data points, objects, not people. There are no known survivors who walked away from these experiments alive. Unit 731 did not only experiment within its walls, its operations extended to lethal biological attacks on civilian populations. The weapons developed, plague-infected fleas, contaminated water supplies, bacteriological bombs, were deployed in Chinese cities and villages. Estimates suggest that these attacks caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands. This was not collateral damage. It was systematic, state-sponsored genocide under the veneer of scientific research and military necessity. The scale, cruelty, and deliberate targeting of civilians mark Unit 731 as not just a medical horror, but one of the worst war crimes in human history. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Unit 731's facilities were destroyed, documents burned, and many prisoners executed. But the horror did not end with the war. Key leaders and doctors of Unit 731, including Shiro Ishii, escaped prosecution. In a controversial decision, the United States granted them immunity from war crimes trial in return for the data derived from their experiments. As a result, much of the evidence was suppressed. For decades, survivors' voices were ignored and the truth covered up. Only over time, through testimonies, museum exhibits, survivor accounts, archival investigations, and international pressure, did the truth of Unit 731 begin to emerge. But many of the victims remain unnamed. Many families still wait for recognition and justice, for a serious historian or researcher. Unit 731 is not simply a horror story. It's a cautionary example of what happens when science loses morality, when institutions see humans as data rather than people, when war and prejudice drown ethics. It shows how quickly medicine, meant to heal, can become an instrument of genocide. For ethicists, medical professionals, humanitarian workers, and survival-aware thinkers, the legacy of Unit 731 warns against any form of medical dehumanization. It reinforces why informed consent, transparency, strict oversight, ethical codes must never be optional, especially when populations are vulnerable, when states are at war, or when research becomes a cover for atrocity. For educators, documentary makers, and memory activists, remembering Unit 731 is not about re-traumatizing, but about honoring victims, ensuring history does not repeat itself, and building a culture where such crimes are never hidden behind secrecy or political convenience. If you research global conflict, human rights, or medical history, map out documented atrocities by Unit 731, cross-reference survivor accounts, old Japanese archives, war crime trial records. Seek to document biographies and stories of victims, reconstruct names lost in history. If you're involved in humanitarian aid, disaster relief, or conflict response, apply rigorous ethical frameworks in any medical intervention. Prioritize transparent consent. Treat patients with dignity. Remember the weight of history when dealing with vulnerable populations. If you are an educator or content creator, use this story to teach about medical ethics, wartime atrocities, human rights, and the need for accountability. Approach with respect and responsibility. Unit 731 stands as one of the darkest chapters in human medical and wartime history, a place where cruelty was methodical, science was perverted, and human lives were sacrificed for horror. Studying it is painful, but it is necessary. Not to dwell in horror, but to ensure humanity never again allows such atrocities under the veil of research, military necessity, or national security. If you found this guide meaningful, if you believe in truth, memory, justice, and human dignity, make sure to subscribe for more deep explorations into history's critical and often painful corners. Share this video with fellow history buffs, human rights students, researchers, or anyone who must remember so humanity does not forget.